I'd like for you to turn them back off again. So, our next teller. She is our featured teller. She's a native of Asheville and spent much of her life in Western North Carolina. She has numerous degrees from various universities in various disciplines. Needless to say, she's a lifelong learner. She has worked writing legislation, owned and operated a Christmas tree farm, and built and designed and built a log home. Her stories paint vivid pictures of childhood and heritage. Her story today is from her childhood, and it's an original Jack tale. Catherine Yael Saluda.
Well, that's interesting what she said. I actually have two stories. One is a story from my childhood, and the other is the original Jack tale. So that's okay. We're going to put them together. All right. Well, I moved about 4 years ago, and all of these memories came spilling out of cardboard boxes that had lain untouched for decades. And one of the things that popped out was this kind of scruffy, bedraggled, stuffed fellow. And from the little stuffed fellow came a little bit of fluff of a story that I call Rabbit. Now, yesterday, if you're a storyteller or know about our community, the first day of the month is always rabbit, rabbit, rabbit. Why, I'm not sure. So here's Rabbit. Rabbit lived with father and mother and child at the corner of Trinity Chapel and Old Fall Creek Roads. He was a reassuring mix of old navies, rusts, and ivories, some plain, some patterned, stitched together thriftily from Daddy's old gardening flannel shirts, from worn cotton sheets and aprons that just couldn't be mended one more time. His ears were lined in vivid pink silk from mother's slip, torn one night during playtime with father. Handsome, gorgeous as rabbits go, he was really quite a scruffy fellow and lumpy. And this was due to the cotton batting that he was stuffed with. But he had the intrepid heart of an explorer and child who loved him. He often spent time with child. He was the featured guest at her tea parties and had the front row seat at the Plaza Theater in Asheville for Saturday matinees. His favorite movie was Walt Disney's Fantasia. You remember that, all that phalanx of dancing brooms prancing around with pails of water. And that was curious to Rabbit because mother had a broom, but he'd never seen it dance or carry water. He proudly wore splotches of breakfast oatmeal, splutterings of fruit juices and hot chocolate. Why, he'd been potted into Mother's Philodendron once or twice, and he had been to swim in the toilet and then immediately into a soapy tub. He often helped child excavate for redworms and roly-polies out in the backyard, and often spent summer evenings tucked into the stacked rock wall that surrounded the garden. There he communicated with the owls that flew overhead, looking at him very curiously. That wasn't the kind of rabbit they usually like to eat. And the friendly little garter snakes and the magical golden orb weaving spiders who seemed to have the gift of riding on the webs. You see, Rabbit knew that animals had this ability to communicate with one another, sometimes even audibly. All in all, he was a well-traveled fellow, but he yearned for journeys of his own itinerary. Then one afternoon, Father brought home the pedal red, shiny fire engine You know, the kind that goes crank, crank, crank. And child, formerly in the custody of father and mother, now had a taste of independent motion. And child cranked around the yard, and Rabbit found himself in the less desirable environment of the toy box. And there he languished all summer long, fussing and fuming. Oh, life is just passing by, he said. Child was in nursery school the morning that mother felt cold-hearted enough to sort the toy box. 3 piles, one for the Salvation Army, one for sentiment set aside, and the other for the trash can. Her appraising eye and hand lingered over the dirty, besodden rabbit. Sentiment, sanitation. Sanitation sentiment, but sanitation won, and out to the curb he went. His black button eyes looked around and one leg flopped over the side of the can. He inhaled the smells of the great outdoors. He heard bird song both nearby and far off. And he felt the bond with child loosening. Where shall I go and what shall I see? Now that I'm out of the house, I'm on my own, I'm free, thought. He looked behind him and he spied this big black Labrador retriever. He was visiting each of the cans, enticing smells, just ahead of the lumbering garbage truck. Oh, ho, said the rabbit. Transportation, how's he work? He was referencing the trash truck that was now growing quite near to him. And the dog said, oh ho? Oh no, you know not of the dangers and the horrors of a landfill house, Rabbit. You don't want to go there, you know? You don't want to go there. Well, then how did the truck was now getting quite near. Dog jumped up on his hind legs and he retrieved Rabbit from the trash can with a soft mouth, and they set off on a gentle canter down Trinity Chapel. Dog was just gamboling lazily along. Rabbit was just flopping in his mouth, and oh, what a perspective he did have up high in Dog's mouth. Oh, his heart expanded with the smells of the outdoors, the warm grass, the spicy dandelions, the watery smell of maturing sweet corn as they went down the road. Flower scents bloomed up out of perennial borders on the road. And there was a strange duality of smell sifting down from the limbs of the trees, arching overhead and floating up from the hot asphalt. He was just hardly able to take it all in. So happy. Oh, thank you, he said to Dog. However, the boss was However, on the next block, they crossed paths with Mother, leading Child home from nursery school. Mother and Child were deep in conversation about the nursery lunch when Child looked up. Oh, the dog's gonna come. Well, I want you to know that Mother was just the very image of Southern ladiness. And in fact, in her home, she was known as Miss Magnolia. But in a flash, she realized that emotional trauma and future relational difficulties with her only child were looming ahead of her. And she hitched her dress up over her garters and she took off after Dog. Dog saw this and he picked up his pace. Oh, squeaked Rabbit. Dog's jaws were enclosing him in the effort of escape. It didn't feel very good. Oh, it wasn't much fun being crushed in the jaws of Dog now. Oh, would you put me down? Dog seeing mother advancing on him, swinging her purse over her head, dropped dog into a soft flower bed. Oh, bye-bye, little buddy. I hope you have good life. Dog ran off, barking gaily as mother fetched up, panting out. She daubed her face with a lace hanky drawn from her bosom. Her former pristine, rich twist was now hanging in shreds around her face. Her flowered rayon dress clung wetly to her back and her thighs, and her gait was a bit offset by her broken heel. Oh, she was so disgusted by the saliva dripping torn rabbit. But nonetheless, she bent down, scooped him up, and returned him to child's eager, grasping hands. Through a veil of tears and runny nose, child asked, "But why did rabbit leave home?" Mother knelt down, embraced them both, and said, "That's a story that will have to wait until you're older and you love me more." And so rabbit came back with the father, mother, and child. His adventures now curtailed to the tax-paid property. He found that safety and security more than made up for exciting adventure. With the red shiny fire engine around the yard, and rabbit tucked into the side of the fire engine and next to the child's warm side. Relief. And so he lived out his life in the company of father and mother and child. Well, Jack has been around these parts since people came over from the British Isles a few hundred years ago. Everybody knows Jack. We don't usually hear too much about his dad, but we know about his mom and about his brothers, Will and Tom. And I guess the other thing that we mainly know about Jack is that he's not too fond of employment. And even though he's lazy on the outside, he's got a mind like a steel trap. He can always come up with a good device for escaping work and responsibility. But on this particular day, Will and Tom having gone with their father to the WPA, he stayed at home to take care of mom. Somebody had to. And he was sitting on the porch and getting more bored by the day. So the next morning when he woke up, he said to his mother, "I think I'm just going to walk out a while in the world." And she said, "Well, Jack, that's fine. You go and you do whatever pleases you, but you be sure that you're back for dinner." And he said, as he walked down off the porch and he pulled on out to the county road. And he walked and he walked. Didn't have anything particular in mind, just wanted to see what was going to happen to him that day and hoping that he would see some new sights. And he walked some more. Pretty soon he come to the settlement. There are a few stores on either side of Main Street. And right down at the end of Main Street was the big general store, just the heart of the whole community. And on the front of that store was a porch. And on that porch was a long bench. And on that bench sat 3 of the most irritating girls God ever made. They saw Jack coming, and they started giggling and twittering and acting all silly. And Jack was just all twittered the first one. "What you doing today, Jack?" Jack said, "Well, nothing much. I'm just ambling along." Talked to them at home. Number 2 twitterer. "Ain't you going to kill you a unicorn today, Jack, or maybe a child?" Oh, he was almost by them now. But here comes the third one. "Oh, Jack, is you going to marry a king's daughter today?" If I run up on him, he snorted and went on past He left that settlement, continued to walk a little bit. I guess he strolled along for about 2 hours. And he was beginning to feel a little bit hungry. After all those biscuits and gravy that Mama fixed him were hours before he was hungry. So walking a little bit more, he saw a little path leading off into the woods to the right. It was just a little goat trail. Didn't look like much, but he thought, I bet there's a cabin at the end of that road, and I bet there's someone there who's going to give me something to eat. So on he went. And sure enough, there was a little cabin. He hallooed at the gate, because you had to do that in those days. You couldn't call ahead and say, I'm on the way. But if you didn't halloo, you might be greeted by some gunshot. So he hallooed at the gate. This little wise woman come out on the front porch and she peered down at Jack and he peered up at her and she said, why, looky there, it's a half-starved youngin'. You just better come on in here, have some soup with me. Oh, sounded good to Jack. Well, ma'am, I guess I will just come on in and have a little soup with you. Thank you kindly. Went on into the house. He looked over at the fireplace and there was this great big iron pot that was hung on a hook, swung over the fire, and it was bubbling away. And there were some pretty reasonable good smells coming out of that pot. And he told the old lady, what you got in that pot smelling so good? And she said, well, there's just some things I turned up in the garden this morning. I went out there with a spade and fork and I turned me up some turnips and some onions and a potato or two, but it's just not the same without some carrots. Jack said, well, I'll go out on the porch. I'll take that there spade and fork. I'll go out back to the garden. I'm going to find you some carrots. And he did. He brought them back and the little wizened old woman scraped them, sliced them into the pot. Began to smell better now. Jack says, about time to eat. I'm hungry. And the lady said, oh, but I'm just thinking I need a little bit of side meat to go in that pot. Just flavor everything up so nice. She said, but you go ahead and wash up. We'll get ready for dinner anyway. So she took down, turned the rice up off the shelf with a little pocket knife. And she sliced a few slivers into another little pot of water. Put that on the boil. Pretty soon Jack had enough to clean up. And he washed his face and washed his hands. And the little old lady said, don't you just wash your uppers? And Jack said, well, I reckon I'll get good and clean for dinner. And he rolled down his overalls and rolled down the top of his union suit. He washed his uppers. And then the little old lady said, well, why don't you wash your lowers too? Well, Jack allowed he hadn't had a bath in a week. It's a good opportunity. So he rolled up his pants, rolled up the union suit. He washed his lowers and he said, well, now I think I'm ready. And he heard a few steps behind him. He turned around, and there was that little old lady holding a butcher knife about as big as she was. And she brandished that thing at him, and she said, I told you I needed a little side meat, and that looks like some good clean side meat right there. And she was poking that knife in Jack's ribs. Jack said, whoa, wait a minute now. Somebody's going to get hurt. And the old lady said, yes, it's going to be. Go put some side in first. Jack said, thinking fast. Told you could think fast when you had to. Well, what about Earth Whistle Pig or Possum if I found one of those outside with that boot? Well, I reckon it would. An Earth Whistle Pig would be pretty tasty. So Jack went out back. He'd seen a hole belonging to an Earth Whistle Pig up on the mountain. He went up there to that hole, constructed him a little slip noose trap, staked it out in front of the hole, and pretty soon old Grandpa Earth Whistle Pig came home and he stepped right in that trap. Well, that thing tightened up around his leg and he pulled and he pulled and he whistled and he whistled and he couldn't get loose. Jack whipped him upside the head, laid him out, took him inside to the old lady's sheep, skinned him and chopped him up, and in about half an hour, perfect. Well, Jack, who'd been wondering how he was going to get out of there unskinned himself, decided that he needed to eat. So he and the old lady sat down and screamed and they had lunch, and he left, thanking her for the soup. Well, that was some experience, he said to himself. Went on down the road, kept walking. A couple hours more, here's another little goat path. This one goes off to the left. He walks down that path a little bit. Here's another cabin. Hello. When an old man or woman come out the door onto the porch. Come on up here, young man. We've been waiting for you. Waiting for me, said Jane. How'd you know I was a coming? The old lady said, oh, son, there's always some boys coming by. Me and the old man's old. We can't do much anymore. And there's always some boys coming by who want to earn a little bit of money. And we ask them to help us out. And they don't do half of what they need to do. And maybe would you help us out? Jack looked around. There's a lot of work to be done. There's chickens scratching all in front of the house, clucking around, nothing to eat. There's an old cow mooing back in the barn, just desperate to be milked. And the big field out behind the house was just full of mature, delicious corn needed to be picked. So the old lady said, you see what needs to be done, we'll pay you good. How much? Said Jack. Always didn't want to work much, but wanted to have some money. Well, maybe $20. Well, that'd be nice. So Jack had never seen $20, much less thought he could earn it. So he sat in and he milked that cow first just to hush her up. And then he got some shelled corn and fed those chickens. He asked the man for his horse and wagon. He hitched them up, went out to the field, and before you knew it, he was back at the cabin. That wagon was filled up with delicious corn. Everything had been done. And the little old lady said, you just come up here and sit on the porch with the old man, and I'll go and get your money. Jack laughed, that was fine. So he come up on the porch, he looked in the window, and he saw the little old lady go to the sugar robe in the front room, pull out a drawer, take out an old raggedy French purse, and pull the biggest wallet we have ever seen out of that purse. It was that big, big amount of cash. She peeled off the 20, handed it to Jack, and said, here's the 5 for being so extra fast. Now, me and the old man, we was talking. And like I said, we're too old to go anywhere, but this money needs to be put into our account at the bank in town. And we was wondering, since you're such a good, intelligent, honest, and hard-working boy, that we felt we could entrust you with this money, and we just can't do it. So would you please help us out? Jack's thinking to himself, here I am, trying to think of how to get this whole wad of cash, and she just called me nice and honest and hardworking. So he took the money, put it in his center pocket, and set off down the county road to town. Before he'd gone too far, he'd come upon this town. There's stores on each side of the street. It's looking a little familiar. Down at the end of the street, there was this big general store, and on the general store was a front porch. On the front porch was a bench, and on the bench sat the same 3 irritating and annoying girls he had seen that very morning. Why, he had not walked out a while in the world. He'd walked out in a circle. Well, those girls were still twittering at him. Oh, Jack, oh, where have you been, Jack? You have a nice day. He just walked on past down the street to the bank. Walked in the door of the bank, and the manager came forth to help him. When he laid that big wad of cash on the counter, the manager's eyes came out on stalks, and he called the president of the bank to come and do the transaction. Well, the president came out. He saw that big wad of cash. His eyes come out on stalks, and he counted it out. $2,250. That was what that old couple had. Minus, of course, Jack's 25. And that brought the assets of the bank up to the princely amount of $2,875. While that bank president offered Jack a job as loan officer in training on the spot. Well, the last time I was up in those parts, I went by there Jack is now made vice president of that bank. He wears handsome brown Ray-Bans from a Sears Roebuck catalog now, no more barefoot. He wears a nice tailored suit, and he takes a bath twice a week. And he's been thinking that maybe one of these days he just might get around to marrying one of them irritated and annoying